There are plans to extend the emergency rule in Rivers State, says Fubara'S Commissioner Bali. Hello viewers and welcome to Infogist TV. The Commissioner for Youth under the suspended Governor Similar Fubara Chisom Bali has alleged that there are plans to extend the emergency rule in Rivers State. He made this claim during an interview on Arise TV on Monday. In his words, there is a plan to extend the emergency rule before the end of the 6 months. They want to incite problems that will make the president make another pronouncement. Of course, if there is any pronouncement, it calls for the end of the administration, he said. He further elaborated on perceived political maneuvers, saying in politics, there is what we call body language. You will see that if you study the body language, that is the plan where they set aside a subsisting project, wanting to design a budget. But someone that was sent to establish peace even wants to install sole administrators at the local government level. Bali accused the Minister of the Federal Capital Territory, Nyesom Wike, of orchestrating these plans. The former governor, who is the Federal Capital Territory Minister, and his cohorts, the assembly members, the local chairman, whose tenures elapsed, as it were, are the people I am talking about. Because they are not at rest with the achievements of the governor. They want to distort the administration, he said. He also criticized President Bola Ahmed Tinubu for his involvement in the Rivers State crisis, asserting that there are more pressing issues nationwide. All these issues are geared towards 2027, and we are so surprised that His Excellency will be meddling in this kind of matter when there are more burning issues, he said. People are dying every day in Plateau State, but there is no state of emergency. But in River State, there was a declaration of emergency when we did not have anybody hurt. In River State, everybody is going about their duty, and that is why everyone is calling on President to rescind his decision. The controversy surrounding River State continues to escalate. All things being equal, the tenure of the controversially appointed sole administrator is expected to end by September. It was reported earlier that operatives of the Nigerian police force on Monday morning fired tear gas at protesters gathered at Isaac Boro Park in Port Harcourt, the Rivers State capital. The protesters, primarily members of the Take It Back movement, were met with a heavy police presence when they gathered at the protest venue as early as 9 a.m. The attack was confirmed by the South-South Regional Coordinator of the Take It Back movement in a phone interview with our reporters on Monday morning. Yes, it is true. Some of our guys were attacked by the police. I'm trying to assess this situation. I will get back to you, he told our reporters. It was also reported that policemen gave the protesters a hot chase and beat up some of them, including journalists covering the event. The demonstrators listed several grievances, including the repeal of the Cybercrime Act and the suspension of the governor, Similayi Fubara. Meanwhile, 4 individuals who were recently acquitted of charges related to the fire incident at the Rivers State House of Assembly have made startling claims. They allege that they were offered a 200 million naira overseas relocation package in exchange for altering their statements to falsely implicate Edison Ehe, the chief of staff to the Rivers State suspended governor Similayi Fubara. The four men, identified as Chime Azebalike, Kenneth Basa, and Oladele Lukman, and Macpherson Olomini, were initially detained in connections with the fire that broke out at the assembly in December 2023. After enduring over 6 months in detention at the Kuje Correctional Facility, Abuja, they were acquitted of all charges in November 2024. Meanwhile, in a press briefing held in Port Harcourt on Monday, Ezebalike disclosed that they had been approached recently by a prominent leader of the People's Democratic Party from Mubiakbo local government area who allegedly urged them to change their testimony and name Edison Ehe as the mastermind behind the assembly fire. This is after everything we have been through. We cannot be part of any nefarious plot, especially not after the trauma we endured. The four men claimed that the request was part of the broader political agenda linking their case to statements made by former head of state George Wike in Abuja. They also suggested that the pressure to implicate Ehi was related to other high-profile cases, including the brutal murder of Ahoda area DPO Bako Abashim and an alleged assassination attempt on the Speaker of the River State House of Assembly, Martin Samehuli. Recalling their harrowing experience, the men described being arrested in December 2023 under dubious circumstances. Oladele was arrested on December 5th, 2023, followed by Chime and Macpherson on December 16th and Kenneth on January 5th, 2024. They were allegedly blindfolded, detained at the Federal Intelligence Response Team facility in Port Harcourt and subjected to torture and coercions, including being denied legal access and forced to sign false confessions. One of the most disturbing incidents involved a serving member of the River State House of Assembly who allegedly visited the detainees with a uniformed officer and Ehe pressured them to implicate Ehe. When they refused, they claimed they were subjected to beatings and starvation. They tried to break us, Basa said during the briefing. When we refused to cooperate, they turned to beatings and starvations. Meanwhile, in addition to the physical abuse, the men alleged that a former local government chairman had offered them bribes to implicate Ehe. The bribe, they said, included 200 million naira and an overseas relocation package. These bribes were reportedly repeated when the men were transferred to detention in Abuja. Some of the detainees claimed they were promised freedom in exchange for framing Pasa as an arsonist. After more than 6 months of detention, the charges against them were finally dropped in November 2024, and the matter were transferred to the Federal High Court in Port Harcourt. However, with their acquittal now final, the men said they were speaking out not just for their own sake but to expose the length to which some political figures would go to manipulate the system for their own gain. This country belongs to us all, Lukman said, addressing the press. No one should be tortured or forced to lie for political convenience. We call on civil society, the media, and all justice-loving Nigerians to rise and resist the weaponization of state institutions against innocent citizens. Meanwhile, the United States-based Institute of Law Research and Development on Monday called on President Bola Ahmed Tinubu to reverse the suspension of River State government Similaye Fubara, warning that failure to do so could irreparably damage his legacy. It stressed that such a decision undermines democratic principles and threatens Nigerians' constitutional integrity. A statement urging the reversal was signed by Professor Cyprian Edward Ekwo, Director of Ilondun, and Professor of International Environmental and Public International Law. The Institute highlighted that the suspension, along with the subsequent declaration of a state of emergency in River State, could set a dangerous precedent for the country's democracy. They warned if the Supreme Court upholds the emergency declaration and the suspension of democratically elected state governor and legislature by another democratically elected officials, it would permanently stain your legacy. You'll be remembered as the president who undermined constitutional principles and legitimized illegality. A state of emergency can only be justified when there is a genuine breakdown of law and order that overwhelms the Nigerian police force, conditions that were not present in River State. The Institute argued that the suspension of a democratically elected governor and legislature by a sitting president is unconstitutional and cannot be justified by a state of emergency without a legitimate breakdown of law and order. It warned that such actions would stain Tinubu's legacy, positioning him as a leader who disregarded the rule of law, while noting that the Supreme Court of Nigeria is currently handling a suit filed by 7 opposition governors challenging the legality of the suspension. The statement cautioned that any attempt to avoid a ruling on the case, such as dismissing it on technicalities, would further damage the public perceptions of both the judiciary and the president's commitment to democracy. The Supreme Court justices cannot, in good conscience, sustain such an obvious constitutional violations. Should the court resort to dismissing the case on technical grounds or employ orchestrated tactics, it will be perceived as judicial compromise under your influence, further eroding public trust in both the judiciary and your administration, Edward Ekpo stated. The institute urged the president to act swiftly, reverse the suspension, and reaffirm his commitment to democracy, warning that the future of the Nigerian democratic institution is at stake.